Sometimes, when the night grows quiet and the world softens into stillness, ancient civilizations feel closer than the beating of our own hearts. Tonight, we travel back to a land shaped by the slow breathing of the Nile, a place where time moved like drifting sand, and ordinary lives unfolded beneath skies filled with wandering stars. Ancient Egypt was more than a kingdom of pharaohs and gods. It was a living rhythm, delicate and human, carried on the backs of farmers, artisans, mothers, dreamers, and the quiet souls history rarely names. So let the weight of the modern world loosen its grip, and come with me to a place where the past glows like a lantern held gently in the dark. If these words begin to bring you a little peace, if they help your thoughts settle like warm dust after a long day, then let this channel stay beside you on your quieter nights too, a small companion, as you drift deeper into history, and maybe closer to sleep. There's a certain hush that falls over the Nile Valley before sunrise, a stillness so deep that it feels like the river itself is holding its breath. In that blue hour, before the first light spills over the horizon, ancient Egypt rests in a gentle quiet, wrapped in a coolness that comes only for a brief moment each day. Long before the kingdom grew into the Egypt we imagine in our minds, long before pyramids, long before pharaohs carved their names into eternity, there was simply the river and the people who trusted its rhythm. Everything began with water, not in a poetic sense alone, but in the truest, most essential way. The Nile was life. The Nile was time. And for the people who lived along its banks, its steady flow was a kind of lullaby, assuring them year after year that the world was still turning the way it should. When the first light finally spread across the valley, it revealed a landscape soft with morning mist. Farmers rose quietly from beds made of woven reeds, stretching away the night as their small homes warmed in the glow of early sun. These homes were simple, walls shaped from sun-dried mud brick, smooth beneath gentle hands, cool to the touch even in the heat of the day. Inside them lived families who understood life not as a race, but as a series of steady steps, each one tied to the Nile seasons. To wake in ancient Egypt was to accept a slow, unhurried pace, letting the day unfold as calmly as the river outside. A farmer's work began with the soil, rich and dark from the annual flood. When the Nile swelled each year, a gift they called the inundation, it carried silt from distant lands, settling it gently across the fields like a blanket of opportunity. As the waters withdrew, they left behind ground fertile enough to feed an entire civilization. Families walked barefoot into the moist earth, pressing footprints in the mud that smelled of rain even when no rain had fallen. Children followed, stepping where their parents stepped, laughing softly as mud squelched between their toes. Life here was physical but never rushed, grounded in tasks repeated through generations, tasks that connected the people not only to the land but to memory of those who came before them. Livelihood in ancient Egypt was shaped by cooperation. Men guided wooden plows pulled by oxen, steady animals with patient eyes. Women carried baskets of seed, letting the grain scatter through their fingers with movements as fluid as dance. Even the smallest child had a role, watching for birds, fetching water, bringing comfort with a presence small but essential. Work was a shared heartbeat, each person moving in rhythm with the next. And when the sun climbed higher, warming their shoulders and filling the field with shimmering heat, the labor continued with a kind of quiet strength that belonged only to those who worked with the earth, not against it. There was beauty in their routine, not the grand beauty of monumental structures or the shimmering gold of royal tombs, but a soft beauty, the kind found in ordinary lives lived with purpose. A pot simmering at the edge of a home, a mother braiding her daughter's hair in the soft shade, a fisherman casting a net into the Nile, watching ripples spread outward like rings of time. Each moment held a kind of peace, a certainty that tomorrow would come much like today, and that this was not something to fear, but something to appreciate. Their predictability was not dullness. It was comfort. As the day stretched on, the sound of life rose gently into the air. Goat bells chimed like small, distant music. Birds circled above the fields, calling out in bright notes that echoed across the valley. The river itself made a sound that was less like rushing water, and more like a steady whisper, a constant presence that never truly disappeared. And over everything, you could sense the trust the Egyptians had in their home. They did not question the Nile. They did not doubt the sun. Season arrived as faithfully as breath, And because of this, they built their lives around rhythms both cosmic and familiar. Evenings in the Nile Valley were the softest part of the day. As the sky deepened into shades of amber and rose, families returned home, brushing dust from their hands and shoulders. Fires were lit not for spectacle, but for warmth and nourishment, their glow casting gentle shadows inside the small rooms where stories were shared. The Egyptians loved stories. They loved them in the way one loves comfort, speaking them in rhythms slow and soothing. Tales of gods who guided the world like lantern bearers. Tales of ancestors who watched from the stars. Tales of simple wisdom, carried quietly from parent to child. Night settled slowly, like a blanket lowered with care. The desert cooled, the wind softened, and the sky filled with stars that seemed almost close enough to touch. It was under this sky that the people of the Nile Valley truly understood their place in the world. Small, yes, but also connected to something vast and ancient. The universe did not frighten them. It reassured them. Each star was a reminder that life was part of a pattern older than any kingdom, any monument, any name. And so, as sleep drifted toward them, they rested knowing their world was stable, warm, and held together by the gentle pulse of the Nile. It was a life without hurry, a life shaped by nature's slow breath, a life that, in many ways, still whispers to us across the centuries. And so, as the night deepened, their journey moved quietly forward. As dawn returned again and again, the people of ancient Egypt learned to read the world in ways that feel almost magical to us now. They could sense approaching seasons not through complicated tools or charts, but through the language of the land itself. The smell of the wind as it shifted, the way birds changed their patterns above the river, the subtle rise or fall of the waterline against the reeds. To them, nature was not something separate or distant. It was a companion, a teacher, a quiet partner in every step they took. And because the Nile rarely betrayed them, they moved through life with a trust so deep that it became the foundation of their entire civilization. Morning light slipped over the fields, washing them in gold. Farmers walked the riverbanks to check the canals, simple channels carved by generations of hands. These canals guided water into thirsty soil, bringing life to barley, emmer wheat, onions, and flax that rustled softly in the breeze. Their irrigation systems were not complicated, but they were clever, a reminder that wisdom does not always come from grand inventions, but from a long, patient understanding of the world. Men and women adjusted water gates made of reeds, watching as streams trickled through, sparkling in the early sun. It was in these small tasks that Egyptians found meaning. Work was not merely survival. It was a conversation with the earth. By midday, the heat grew heavy, and the valley shimmered under the weight of the sun. The Egyptians knew how to live with the heat rather than fight against it. Homes were built to stay cool, their walls thick and their roofs flat. Many families spent the hottest hours resting inside, sharing meals of bread, lentils, and figs, or stepping outside to sit beneath palm trees whose shadows stretched long and thin across the earth. Children played in the shade, their laughter softer now, slowed by the warmth that blanketed the valley. The pace of life adjusted not with stress, but with acceptance, a gentle surrender to the natural rhythm of the day. It was during these midday hours that the river seemed to grow louder, its voice rising as though reminding the people that it was always near. Boats made of papyrus glided across its surface, their sails catching the warm wind as fishermen cast nets into the deep water. They worked with quiet patience, knowing the Nile was generous if approached with respect. When the nets were pulled up, heavy with silver fish that glittered in the sunlight, families would gather to help sort the catch. These were moments of shared joy, small celebrations woven into the fabric of everyday life. They were the kinds of moments that rarely find their way into stone carvings or royal records, but they were the heartbeat of the nation. In the afternoons, the valley often settled into a reflective stillness. The air grew softer, the shadows longer. Farmers returned to their fields to tend animals, goats, cattle, and donkeys that moved slowly beneath the fading light. The Egyptians treated their animals with gentleness, speaking to them in quiet voices as if they were longtime friends. Many believed the gods watched over animals just as they watched over humans, so every creature was cared for with a kind of humble reverence. Even in work, kindness was a constant thread. As the sun began its descent, a golden hue washed over the valley, turning the sky into a warm tapestry of orange and deep red. It was a moment of beauty so consistent and yet so breathtaking that the people never grew tired of it. Families stepped outside to watch the sunset, leaning against one another as the horizon glowed like a slowly burning ember. These sunsets were not merely scenery. They were reminders of the delicate balance that held their world together. Each fading light felt like a promise that night would be gentle and tomorrow would be familiar. Evenings were peaceful, filled with soft chatter as neighbors gathered near their homes. Some shared the day's stories. Others whispered about dreams or distant memories. Children drifted closer to sleep, lulled by the low hum of voices and the comforting crackle of small fires. The Egyptians cherished these quiet gatherings. They believed that harmony in the community was as important as harmony with the land. Arguments were rare and resolved with calm words, for they understood deeply that life demanded cooperation, not conflict. As darkness finally settled, the world transformed. The sky opened into a vast ocean of stars, brighter than anything many of us have ever seen. Without the noise of cities or the glow of artificial lights, the constellations shone with clarity that felt almost divine. The people looked upward with a sense of belonging, convinced that their ancestors live among the stars, watching over them softly. Under that celestial canopy, the worries of the day faded. The Nile glimmered in the moonlight, flowing steadily onward, carrying stories, hopes, and the quiet breath of the valley into the endless night. It was here, in this deep darkness filled with shimmering light, that ancient Egypt found its truest peace. When families lay down to rest, the day did not vanish. It softened. The world did not close. It whispered. And as the entire valley fell into gentle slumber, the Nile continued its eternal song, steady as a heartbeat, ancient as the first dawn. When dawn returned again, it came with the same soft certainty that guided every morning in ancient Egypt. Light spilled slowly over the horizon, not rushing, not pushing, simply unfolding, the way petals open when they feel ready. In those first tender moments of the day, the world felt fragile, as if it were being woven anew by unseen hands. The people of the Nile Valley rose into this gentleness, aware that each sunrise was a blessing carried quietly across the sky. They stepped into cool air with calm hearts, knowing that their lives were shaped not by sudden change, but by the steady comfort of repetition. The mornings became a kind of ritual in themselves. Women emerged from their homes carrying smooth clay jars, their feet brushing lightly against the packed earth as they walked toward the river. They moved with practiced grace, bending at the water's edge as the Nile mirrored their silhouettes in its calm surface. The jars filled with soft gurgle, the water cool and clear as it swirled inside. In the soft light, the ripples shimmered like small fragments of sun. These moments, quiet, ordinary, yet filled with meaning, were the essence of daily life. And as the women returned home, the scent of the river clinging to the air around them, the village slowly awakened. Children followed the sounds of morning, emerging sleepily into the world with hair tousled by dreams. Their laughter was softer at this hour, like sunlight broken into pieces. Some helped their parents grind grain on smooth stone slabs, hands moving in circles that echoed movements older than memory. Others fed chickens, scattered feed for goats, or waited eagerly for first loaf of bread to bake. The warmth rising from ovens made of clay brought with it a familiar comfort, the promise of a new day wrapped in the aroma of fresh meals. Even the simplest tasks felt woven with contentment, as though the people understood that peace was found not in what they achieved, but in how they lived. When the fields called again, farmers answered with patience. They walked along narrow paths lined with reeds, their shadows long in the early sun. The earth beneath their feet held stories from countless seasons, and they treated it with deep respect. They inspected the growing barley and wheat, checking for signs of health or distress, whispering to themselves as though speaking to plants might encourage them to flourish. There was no hurry in their movements, only steady care, as if each gesture acknowledged the fragile balance that sustained their lives. Tools worn smooth by generations were carried with familiarity, each handle a reminder of the hands that once held it. As the sun rose higher, cool breezes drifted across the fields, carrying the faint scent of damp soil and blooming lotus flowers from the riverbanks. Birds took flight, gliding effortlessly above the land, their wings catching the light in soft flashes. The people paused now and then to watch them, letting their eyes follow the gentle arc of their flight. These small moments of stillness were not distractions. They were part of life's rhythm, in a world guided by nature. Even a passing bird could feel like a message, a reminder that the world was vast but also intimately connected. By midday, the heat settled in again, pressing down like a heavy blanket. Work slowed to a comfortable crawl. Families gathered beneath canopies or inside shaded rooms to rest, to share stories, or simply to sit in silence, listening to the distant murmur of the river. The Egyptians knew that rest was as essential as effort. They believed that harmony came from balance, that a life lived too fast would lose its shape, its sweetness. And so, in the warm embrace of midday stillness, they let their minds soften, their bodies release tension, and their thoughts drift lightly like leaves atop the Nile. Sometimes, during these hours, music threaded gently through the air. A father plucked a lute, its soft tones rising like a warm breeze. A young girl hummed a tune she had learned from her grandmother, her voice blending with the quiet crackle of firewood. These simple melodies held generations within them. Music was not reserved for ceremonies. It lived in the spaces between tasks, in the pauses of the day, in the tender bonds of family. It was a way of turning ordinary moments into something luminous. As the worst of the heat passed, life stirred again. The river drew people back to its banks. Fishermen dipped their nets into water, their hands moving with ease, their silhouettes framed against the shimmering surface. Children skipped stones, watching them dance across the water in brief glimmers. Women washed clothes along the shore, the rhythmic splash of fabric echoing softly between the reeds. The water wrapped around their fingers, cool and refreshing, a comfort in the lingering warmth. The river was not merely a resource. It was a companion that offered renewal with every touch. Evening unfolded slowly, as if reluctant to disturb the peace of the valley. Shadows stretched long and cool across the earth, and the sky shifted into hues of apricot and soft mauve. Families returned to their homes carrying baskets of food, small bundles of herbs, or simple tools. Dinner was quiet and warm, shared with gratitude but without ceremony. The Egyptians valued companionship more than grandeur. A shared meal, a gentle conversation, a soft laugh. These were the treasures that made life rich. When darkness finally arrived, the stars emerged in full splendor. They sparkled with clarity that made the night feel alive. Some families sat outside their homes just to watch the constellations, whispering the stories behind them. The sky was a map of myths. Each cluster of stars a reminder of gods, heroes, or ancestors who watched over them with steady eyes. Under that vast canopy, the people felt safe, connected to something eternal yet comforting. Night in ancient Egypt was never truly silent, but it carried a softer kind of sound, one that wrapped itself around the land like a gentle cloak. The Nile whispered as it flowed, reeds rustled with the movement of small creatures beginning their own nightly routines, and distant voices drifted like fading embers from homes preparing for rest. Under the pale glow of the moon, the entire valley felt suspended, as if time were unspooling slowly and tenderly across the darkened landscape. It was in these quiet hours that the Egyptians felt closest to the divine, believing that the world of spirits and gods brushed gently against their own to the cool air of the evening. In this calm, families settled into the rhythm of night with deliberate ease. Inside their homes, oil lamps flickered softly, casting golden halos across the smooth mud brick walls. The lamps were simple, small clay bowls filled with oil with wicks made from twisted flax, but their glow carried warmth that felt almost sacred. Children leaned into the light as their parents shared stories passed down through countless generations. These tales, spoken in a soft cadence, were not loud performances but gentle threads tying one life to another. A child might rest their head against a parent's shoulder as the story unfolded, the flame's reflection shimmering in half-sleepy eyes. Even the shadows on the walls seemed to listen. Some stories were about the gods, of Ra guiding the sun across the sky each day, of Osiris watching over the realm of the dead with a tender but steady hand, of Isis whose love was said to heal even the deepest wounds. These myths were not distant or frightening. They were comforting, reminders that the universe was cared for by forces full of intention and wisdom. Other stories were more earthly, Simple tales of kindness, bravery, or mistakes that taught gentle lessons. The Egyptians believed that wisdom was a soft gift, one best delivered through reflection rather than force. Their stories mirrored that belief, carrying truths like small lanterns glowing in the dark. Outside, the air cooled enough for the desert winds to reach the valley. These winds arrived quietly at first, brushing over the sand dunes before drifting into the villages with a faint sigh. They carried the scent of distant hills and the dryness of the open desert. For the people, this breeze was familiar, a reminder that beyond their fertile world lay vast stretches of land shaped by silence. Yet the desert did not frighten them. It protected their borders, held their myths, and kept them aware of how precious the river's life-giving waters truly were. The desert and the Nile existed in balance, each defining the other. As nighttime deepened, families prepared their beds. Most slept on raised platforms or simple mats woven from palm fibers, covered with soft linens made from finely spun flax. The linens cooled the skin, especially in the hotter months, and carried a faint earthy scent that felt grounding. Before lying down, many whispered quiet prayers, short, steady lines asking for protection, guidance, or simply gratitude for another day lived in harmony with the land. These prayers were not rigid recitations. They were personal, heartfelt, like gentle breaths released into the vastness of night. Sleep came gradually in ancient Egypt. People drifted toward it as their homes dimmed and the world outside softened into darkness. Yet even as they slept, the valley remained alive. Frogs sang near the riverbanks. The distant cry of a night bird echoed through the warm air. Somewhere, a lone fisherman prepared a small boat for a quiet journey down the river, trusting the water to guide him in the moonlight. Life never stopped entirely. It simply changed its rhythm, shifting into a slower, more reflective tempo. In the deepest part of the night, when the stars shone brightest and the village lay in peaceful slumber, it was easy to imagine how the Egyptians saw eternity in their world. Their lives were deeply entwined with patterns that stretched far beyond individual years. The rising of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, the blooming of lotus flowers, the cycle of planting and harvest. Each repetition connected them to an endless chain of moments that reached into both past and future. This sense of continuity offered comfort. They believed that just as the Nile returned each year with its life-giving waters, the human soul returned again and again, finding new ways to live, learn, and love. For them, time was not a straight path but a circle, gently turning with the pulse of the universe. This belief gave their nights a serenity that even we can feel through the echoes of history. Under the vast canopy of stars, wrapped in soft linen, and warmed by the closeness of family, the Egyptians slept in the embrace of a world they trusted completely. Their dreams drifted like small boats on the river, guided by forces unseen but always present. The Egyptians believed that a good life began not with grand gestures, but with the quiet mastery of small, daily rituals. And harmonious, each morning became a lesson in balance. As the first rays of sunlight slipped through the cracks in the mud brick walls, he rose not with urgency, but with a slow awareness, as though waking was itself a kind of offering. The coolness of the floor greeted his feet, the faint scent of yesterday's fire still resting in the air. Outside, the river stirred, its surface catching the early gold of dawn, and from somewhere near the reeds, a heron called. The same gentle cry he had heard since childhood, steady and reassuring. Before speaking a single word, before letting the weight of the day press against him, he washed his face with river water drawn the night before. The water was never just water. It was a thread connecting him to millions before him, a silent reminder that he belonged to a world older and wiser than any single life. As he cupped it in his hands, he whispered the same quiet phrase he had learned from his mother, a soft blessing meant to calm the heart. It did. Every time. Breakfast came simply, a piece of barley bread, dipped in a bit of date syrup if the household was fortunate that week. Sometimes there was goat cheese, sharp and fresh, a sign that the animals had been healthy. Sometimes a few figs. But more important than the meal was the feeling of the home around him, the slow stirring of his siblings, the muted shuffle of his father preparing ropes for the boats, the low hum of his mother's morning song as she swept the threshold. Nothing rushed, nothing loud. Even work-heavy mornings carried a kind of quiet grace. When he stepped outside, the village had already awakened into its strange, beautiful harmony. Dust rose beneath passing feet, yet fell just as quickly. Women ground grain with long, practiced strokes, their movements as rhythmic as breath. Children carried jars to the river, laughing in bursts, their voices bright but never sharp. And everywhere, behind it all, the Nile flowed with the steady patience of a living god. Ammonius often paused just to watch it, letting its movement calm his thoughts, reminding him that each day would rise and fall just as gently. His path to the fields was familiar, but he walked it as though seeing it new each morning. The soft rustle of wheat against his legs, the smell of damp earth beneath the warming sun, the distant chanting drifting from a priest's early ritual. The world around him shimmered with life, yet it carried a softness that made even ordinary labor feel like a story being written in slow motion. And yet, beneath this calm, small challenges always waited. A stubborn patch of soil, a tool worn thin, a moment when the sun pressed too hot against his back. But even these moments unfolded quietly, answered not with frustration but with breath, steady hands, and the understanding that life flowed easier when met with patience. This was the rhythm of the ancient Egyptians, never fighting the river of existence, but moving with it, trusting its current. As the hours passed, Ammonius learned how to shape his day the way his ancestors shaped the Nile's banks, gently, intentionally, without forcing what was not ready. And though he was young, he began to sense something profound, that life in Egypt was not defined by kings or battles or great monuments, but by the soft, repeating moments that stitched each day into something meaningful. And so, as the sun lifted higher and the shadows softened at his feet, Ammonius felt the first quiet stirring of understanding that his life, simple as it was, belonged to something vast, ancient, and quietly magnificent. The streets of an ancient village seemed quiet at first glance, but beneath the stillness, life hummed in hidden layers. While the Nile's waters gave the valley its pulse, it was the hands of the workers and artisans that shaped the Egypt the world would remember. They were not kings or priests. Their names were rarely written on monuments. Yet every stone carved, every pot molded, every loom woven, carried the imprint of their lives. These were the invisible architects of civilization, their labor threaded into the very fabric of society. From the early hours of dawn, the workshops and field began to stir. Carpenters carried long beams of acacia wood, their shoulders steady beneath the familiar weight. Stonecutters tapped chisels against granite with a rhythm that was both precise and meditative. The sound of hammering echoed softly across the village, blending with the murmur of the river and the distant call of birds. There was no hurry here, only a disciplined patience that seemed to flow from the land itself. Each movement, each task was deliberate, careful, and full of purpose. Even the youngest apprentices watched and learned, absorbing knowledge in the quiet cadence of observation. Potters shaped clay into vessels, the soft damp earth yielding beneath their fingers, spinning on wheels powered by steady feet. With each turn, each careful press, the raw material transformed, taking the shape of something functional, something beautiful, something meant to last far longer than the hands that created it. As the sun rose higher, the air filled with the scent of wet clay and sanded wood, mixed with the faint sweetness of baked bread from nearby homes. It was a smell that spoke of life, creation, and the unassuming pride of work done well. Women wove flax into linen, their fingers moving with such familiarity that the thread seemed to dance of its own accord. In small clusters, they shared soft conversation and laughter, a low murmur that floated like warm air through the workshops. Their work was both practical and sacred. Linen wrapped bodies for life and, eventually, for eternity. Their hands carried stories. Their patterns echoed generations, and even the simplest stitch connected them to both the living and the dead. Lunch came quietly, sometimes shared in the shade of a small sycamore or beneath the wide branches of a palm tree. The food was humble: flatbread, dried figs, small fish, perhaps a sip of water from a ceramic jar. But shared among these laborers, it felt generous. They spoke little, but the silence was not absence. It was respect, rhythm, the understanding that life itself was measured in hours of steady effort and small, shared joys. By mid-afternoon, the sun cast long shadows across the workshops. The men and women continue their tasks with deliberate care, guided by the quiet flow of the Nile and the invisible patterns passed down through generations. Apprentices learn to read the grains of wood, the cracks in stone, the consistency of clay. They listen to the whispers of their elders, learn the small secrets that made ordinary labor eternal. And as the river shimmered in the distance, carrying boats slowly across its surface, these workers understood that their efforts were part of something far larger than themselves, a civilization that would be remembered long after they were gone. And so, in the soft warmth of the afternoon, the hidden world of artisans thrived quietly, shaping Egypt with hands that history would rarely name, yet never forget. As the afternoon slowly gave way to evening, the village seemed to exhale, a subtle shift in rhythm that only those who lived close to the Nile could sense. The air softened, shadows stretched and deepened, brushing the walls of clay houses in warm amber light. The workers paused briefly, not out of exhaustion, but as if the world itself had asked them to rest for a heartbeat. Even the river, usually steady and flowing with quiet authority, seemed to slow its pace, shimmering lazily in the glow of the lowering sun. Ammonius watched the artisans around him, each absorbed in their delicate labor, each moving in a rhythm born of years, perhaps centuries of tradition. The stonecutters tapped gently at granite blocks, listening as the sound echoed softly, almost like a whispered conversation between material and hand. Carpenters smoothed the rough surfaces of acacia wood, feeling the grain as though it carried the memory of the tree's life. Potters worked with clay that shifted like water, hands pressing, turning, coaxing it into shapes both functional and beautiful. There was no rush here, only presence. Every movement was precise, quiet, and full of intention. Women continued their weaving in the shade, flax fibers running through fingers as if they had a life of their own. Occasionally, a child peeked over the loom, curious, learning in silence. These apprentices watched more than they spoke, absorbing the rhythm of work like a song. Stories were sometimes told quietly here too, not grand tales of kings or gods, but small anecdotes of clever solutions, shared lessons, moments when patience or attention had turned a task from ordinary into remarkable. Even these tiny stories carried the weight of wisdom. The scent of clay, sand, and river mist hung in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of bread baking in nearby ovens. Birds began their evening chorus, soft calls that drifted over the fields and workshops. A sense of gentle completion settled over the village. The day's work was not finished in haste, but completed with care, leaving each artisan with a quiet satisfaction that only comes when something is done with intention. Even in toil there was beauty. Even in repetition, there was life as the sun descended fully. The sky turned from amber to deep rose, spilling color over the valley like soft, warm silk. Fires began to glow in doorways, their gentle flicker illuminating the hands of women preparing meals or mending tools. Families gathered in the last light, sometimes sharing food, sometimes simply sitting together in silence, letting the sounds of the evening carry them forward. There was trust in these moments, of faith in cycles of day and night, in the hands that worked, in the river that guided life so quietly but so surely. Even as darkness approached, the world of the artisans remained alive. The river glimmered under the first touch of moonlight, and distant voices, neighbors, friends, sometimes children still playing, drifted across the fields. Lamps glowed softly within homes, casting halos that seemed almost sacred. The workers had shaped the day. Now they rested, and yet their labor lingered everywhere, in walls, in pots, in woven cloth, in the very rhythm of the village. It was as if Egypt itself exhaled a soft thank you to those who had given their hands and hearts so quietly, so fully, to its creation. In this hidden world, Ammonius realized life was measured differently, not in monuments or wealth, but in the subtle satisfaction of skill passed down, of tasks completed with care, of contributions that would echo long after names were forgotten. It was a lesson in patience, humility, and the quiet immortality of dedication. In the soft evening, under a sky brush of the first stars, the village felt like a living organism, each artisan a heartbeat within it, each task a pulse in the endless flow of Egyptian life. And so, as night began to settle fully over the valley, the hidden world of workers and artisans rested in quiet harmony, ready to awaken again with the river's next whispering dawn. Night deepened over the Nile Valley, soft and velvety, carrying with it the subtle chorus of life that never fully ceased. Even as villagers slept, the faint hum of the river whispered through the reeds, the occasional croak of frog or rustle of nocturnal creatures forming a gentle lullaby. For Ammonius, and for many who had labored through the day, this was a sacred time, a moment to reflect, to feel the weight of labor that had been completed, and to sense the rhythm of a civilization that pulsed quietly beneath every stone and reed. Within the workshops, the last flickers of lamps cast shadows across tools and raw materials. A potter's wheel rested, wet clay slowly drying, shaped by hands that had worked with patience and care. The air still carried the faint scent of river mud and baking bread, a reminder that creation did not end with daylight. It lingered, embedded in objects and patterns, in the very texture of life. Ammonius walked slowly through the village, taking in these traces, feeling connected to generations he could never meet. In the way a tool left its imprint on wood, he felt the imprint of those who had come before him, ancient hands guiding his own understanding of work, patience, and purpose. Artisans sometimes sat outside their homes beneath the soft glow of the moon, mending tools or sorting materials for tomorrow. Their movements were slow, deliberate, almost meditative, as if even the quiet work of preparation was an act of reflection. Children, now fully tired from the day, lay in mats near their parents, the soft rhythm of their breathing blending with the distant lap of river water. It was in this gentle stillness that Ammonius realized the true beauty of his world. Life's meaning was hidden not in monuments or grandeur, but in the quiet mastery of daily tasks, repeated with care, intention, and love. From the rooftops, the stars looked down like scattered jewels, illuminating the world with soft, ethereal light. Ammonius often paused to watch them, feeling their permanence against the fleeting motion of human life. These constellations had guided fishermen and farmers for generations, offering orientation, hope, and stories whispered in the dark. In their soft shimmer, he saw the invisible thread connecting himself to every hand that had shaped the village, every mind that had learned to read the flow of the Nile, and every heart that had rested beneath these same stars. There was a calm wisdom here, born from centuries of observation, patience, and reverence for the world around him. Occasionally, a distant sound would ripple through the night, a cat moving silently across a roof, the soft clatter of a bird startled by movement, or a lone fisherman returning quietly to the riverbank. Nothing was jarring. Everything was a gentle reminder that life, even in its quietest form, moved endlessly forward. And so, as the moon climbed higher, reflecting on the river's surface like liquid silver, Ammonius felt the weight of the day's labor settle softly into him. It was a satisfaction deeper than fatigue, a harmony between human effort and the enduring world around him. Evening stories were shared in whispers, lessons of skill, careful anecdotes of success and error, the soft passing of knowledge that would become invisible yet eternal. Every artisan, every worker, understood that their daily life was part of a much larger rhythm, flowing quietly yet persistently through time. The village was alive not because of noise or spectacle, but because every hand, every action, carried meaning beyond itself. And as Ammonius lay down to rest, lulled by the soft chorus of the night, he carried with him a profound understanding that in the hidden labor of the ordinary, Egypt breathed, lived, and endured. And so, as the night stretched deeper over the valley, the river whispered, the stars shimmered, and the hidden world of workers and artisans rested, ready to awaken again with the sun's gentle return. As the first hints of dawn approached, a soft violet light touched the edges of the valley. The river shimmered faintly, carrying reflections of the awakening sky. Even before the sun appeared fully, the village seemed to inhale, preparing itself for the rhythm of a new day. Ammonius rose quietly, sensing the gentle hum of life beginning again, the murmur of the river, the distant clatter of early birds, and the faint stirrings of those who would once again lend their hands to the world. Artisans emerged from their homes in the subtle light, stretching, adjusting, and readying themselves. The pottery wheels had dried overnight, and the clay, now firm, awaited the press of careful fingers. Stonecutters tapped gently on tools to check their edges. Woodworkers inspected timber as the morning breeze carried the earthy scent of river mud and fresh vegetation. Each movement was deliberate, measured, infused with rhythm older than the valley itself. There was no rush, only intention. Each hand that worked knew its place, its part in the larger story of creation. Children wandered through the streets quietly, following parents or older siblings, absorbing lessons silently. Some carried small jars to the river to fetch water for morning tasks. Others helped prepare simple meals for the day ahead. Their curiosity blended with the cadence of work, like small threads weaving seamlessly into broader fabric of life. Apprentices watched the skilled hands around them, learning not through lectures, but through observation and quiet imitation. Knowledge here was lived rather than spoken. By mid-morning, the sun had risen fully, brushing the valley with soft warmth that promised both labor and light. Women arranged linens, ground grain, or tended to small animals, moving with the quiet grace of those whose lives had long merged with daily necessity. The air was filled with gentle sounds. The hum of wheels, the scraping of chisels, the occasional laugh shared between neighbors. Work was never noisy or hurried. It carried its own harmony, its own beauty. In this, Ammonius found comfort, an understanding that life's poetry was often in repetition, in rhythm, in the careful shaping of moments that might seem ordinary, but were extraordinary in their persistence. By noon, shadows shifted, stretching long across clay walls and the earth beneath their feet. The heat rose, pressing gently upon every shoulder, yet the villagers had adapted to it through generations. They moved with awareness, pacing themselves to match the sun's intensity. Meals were taken in small intervals, often shared beneath the shade of a sycamore or the branches of date palms, allowing both body and mind to rest. Here, in these quiet pauses, life felt both safe and eternal. As the day continued, Ammonius observed the interconnectedness of the village. The potters worked feeding the household with vessels, the weavers linen wrapping bodies for warmth and ceremony, the carpenters crafted beams supporting the homes where families slept and dreamed. Every action, however small, created ripples that stretched beyond the hands that performed them. Ammonius began to see that these hidden artisans were the true lifeblood of Egypt, shaping its identity not through grandeur or fame, but through skill, devotion, and quiet consistency. Evening slowly returned, brushing the valley in warm amber light once more. The villagers concluded their work gently, each returning home carrying the weight of a day spent well. Fires flickered softly in doorways, lamps glowed faintly in small homes, and the air was rich with a mingling sense of cooking, clay, and the river. As night settled, the artisans and workers laid down, not in exhaustion, but in harmony with the world they had shaped. Their labor, though hidden from history's grand monuments, had built civilizations, preserved culture, and nurtured life in ways both visible and invisible. And so, as the stars blinked softly above the Nile and the river whispered its endless lullaby, the hidden world of Egypt's workers rested once more, carried with it the quiet assurance that their efforts, though unseen, would forever endure. Night draped itself fully across the Nile Valley, soft and profound, carrying the gentle hum of life in a lullaby only those who listened closely could hear. Even as homes quieted and the lamps burned low, the essence of the day lingered. The work of hands that shaped, built, and nurtured remained woven into every stone, every vessel, every loom. Ammonius walked slowly through the village, letting the quiet settle into him, absorbing the rhythm of lives that moved almost invisibly, yet it sustained entire generations. In the soft glow of the moon, he could see the faint outlines of tools left to rest, of workshops awaiting dawn, of clay pots drying patiently in the cool air. The world seemed paused in reverence for the hands that had made it, and for the invisible patterns of labor that gave Egypt its pulse. Ammonius' heart lifted with understanding. There was grandeur in the unnoticed, dignity in the unseen, and immortality in devotion performed without expectation of recognition. The river murmured as it wound lazily through reeds, carrying reflections of the starry sky. Somewhere along its banks, a fisherman guided a small boat silently, trusting the water to lead him home. A soft wind carried the scent of fresh linen, damp earth, and distant fires, mingling into a fragrance that felt like life itself. The stars blinked gently overhead, their presence eternal, reminding Ammonius of the continuity that bound past and present together, a lineage of hands, hearts, and minds shaped by centuries, flowing into the lives of those who came after. Ammonius paused by a small sycamore at the river's edge, inhaling the calm. He thought of every stonecutter's tap, every weaver's careful stitch, every potter's pressed clay, and realized that civilization was less a product of kings and monuments than the countless quiet efforts performed each day, repeated over decades, centuries, millennia. He understood, for the first time fully, that the soul of Egypt was hidden here, in the labor that rarely earned recognition, yet built the world itself. Softly, he whispered a silent thanks to the river, to the artisans, to the unseen hands of generations past. And as he returned to his home, the lamps flickering like tiny stars along the streets, he felt the weight of the day dissolve into something luminous. The village, the river, the artisans, and the endless skies seemed to exhale together, carrying a sense of harmony that would endure beyond any name or story ever written. And so, under the quiet embrace of the Nile and the vast canopy of stars, the hidden world rested, ready to awaken once more with the gentle pulse of dawn, its legacy flowing quietly, endlessly, and forever. In the heart of Egypt, beyond the bustling villages and the endless stretch of Nile, stood the palaces and temples, places of mystery, power, and quiet reverence. They were not merely stone and timber. They were worlds within worlds, holding secrets carefully guarded by those who walked their halls. Pharaohs and priests moved within these spaces with deliberate grace, their lives measured by rituals, divine duty, and the invisible threads that connected them to gods and to generations yet unborn. The morning sun kissed the tall columns of the temples, casting shadows that stretched like long fingers across the cool floors. Ammonius imagined the priests as they entered these halls, their sandals silent against stone, robes whispering softly with each step. They carried with them knowledge that few could grasp, scrolls that told of stars, gods, and the delicate balance between life and death. Their voices were low, almost inaudible, chanting prayers that echoed gently, as if even the walls themselves were listening. Pharaohs, too, lived in a rhythm defined by both duty and ceremony. Ammonius pictured them rising before dawn, their lives a series of careful movements, rituals performed with precision, audiences conducted with measured words, offerings presented to gods who were both revered and feared. Yet behind the gold and grandeur, there were moments of quiet reflection, moments when the sun's first light caught the intricate carvings of the palace walls, and the ruler could pause, inhale the scent of incense, and feel the steady pulse of a kingdom flowing beneath their feet. The priests taught the young scribes in hidden chambers, guiding their hands as they traced symbols onto papyrus. Each line, each curve of ink, carried meaning far beyond the page. It was the language of the divine, of eternity itself. Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life, yet inside these sacred spaces, time moved differently. Every action was intentional, every breath measured, every glance meaningful. Knowledge was preserved here, not for fame or wealth, but for the continuity of life, for the balance between gods and mortals. Ammonius imagined the quiet walks through gardens within palace walls, where fountains trickled softly and lotus flowers floated in mirrored pools. Even the rulers and priests, bound by power and ritual, sought these moments of peace, a chance to feel the world outside the weight of duty, to hear the whisper of water, the rustle of leaves, the soft coo of birds. These brief instants were reminders that life, even at the highest levels, was not only about command or ceremony, but also about connection, to nature, to the divine, and to the invisible threads that wove all existence together. As the sun climbed higher, shadows shifted, flickering across carved reliefs that told stories older than most humans could imagine. Ammonius felt a quiet reverence for these lives, lived so distant, yet intimately tied to the heartbeat of Egypt. Here, in hidden chambers and sunlit halls, the rhythm of devotion and power moved like a river, steady, persistent, carrying both mystery and humanity, both reverence and reality. And so, as the day deepened, the secret world of pharaohs and priests unfolded softly, its rhythm quiet but unbroken, waiting for those who could see beyond the gold and stone to glimpse the pulse of history itself. As the day stretched across the valley, Ammonius imagined the pharaohs seated in the inner halls of the palace, the weight of the crown heavy not in metal alone, but in responsibility. Gold reflected the sun's glare, intricate jewelry adorned the ruler's hands and chest. Yet even amidst this brilliance, there was a quiet solitude. Decisions had to be made with care, each word considered, for the life of an empire rested not only in armies or monuments, but in the choices made quietly behind closed doors. Priests moved alongside the ruler, their robes flowing and their voices hushed. They were guardians of knowledge, interpreting the will of gods through rituals and readings of omens. Each ceremony followed a rhythm older than memory, a choreography perfected to maintain balance between heaven and earth. In the sanctum of temples, incense smoke curled in delicate spirals, softening the edges of stone and shadow. It was in these scented, golden spaces that the invisible threads connecting mortals to gods were most tangible, yet paradoxically most hidden. Ammonius pictured the quiet hours between ritual and council when the pharaoh walked through the palace gardens. Lotus blooms mirrored the sky in still pools, palm leaves rustled softly in the wind, and fountains murmured their gentle song. Here, away from the gaze of officials, the ruler's mind could wander, pondering not only the burdens of governance, but also the fleeting beauty of life itself. Every leaf, every ripple, every ray of sunlight was observed, catalogued, treasured in the mind like a secret painting. Even kings, Ammonius realized, needed these small moments to remain human beneath the weight of divinity. Within the temples, apprentices and scribes worked quietly, tracing hieroglyphs with precise, meditative strokes. Every symbol carried meaning layered across centuries. A single miswritten line could alter a message, shift a ritual, or disrupt a delicate balance. The apprentices learned patience, focus, and respect, understanding that even small hands could influence eternity. Ammonius could feel the care that pulsed in every action, the reverence that shaped not just the object, but the very space around it. Evening approached slowly, draping the palace walls in soft gold and shadow. Lamps glowed along corridors, casting pools of gentle light on stone floors polished by countless feet. The pharaoh retired to quiet chambers, perhaps writing or meditating, while priests tended sacred fires and performed whispered prayers to maintain cosmic order. Outside, the Nile reflected the sky's descent into twilight, a mirror for the subtle movements inside. The hidden lives of those in power, though distant from ordinary villagers, were connected by the same rhythms: work, reflection, devotion, and a careful attention to the world that surrounded them. And so, as the day gave way to night, Ammonius felt the weight of unseen worlds pressing softly upon him. A civilization built not only by the hands of workers and artisans, but by rulers and priests whose secret lives guided the pulse of the entire land. In this quiet, intimate knowledge, he sensed the delicate balance of Egypt: power and labor, divine will and human effort, mystery and lived reality, all intertwined in a rhythm older than memory itself. Night fell softly over the palaces and temples, and the Nile reflected the deep indigo of the sky, dotted with stars that seemed to watch quietly over the kingdom. Inside the palace, the corridors were dimly lit, and the grand halls were hushed. Even the servants moved with careful restraint, as if aware that the very walls contained secrets too precious to disturb. The pharaoh, though surrounded by luxury and attendants, walked alone through these halls at times, tracing the worn stone floors with a steady, almost meditative step. In solitude, the weight of the kingdom was both heavy and strangely tender. The priests, too, embraced the night with purpose. They tended sacred fires that had burned for generations, their flickering light casting gentle shadows across intricately carved hieroglyphs. The ritual chants, soft and deliberate, filled the air like a lullaby for eternity itself. Each syllable was shaped to honor the gods, to maintain cosmic order, and to weave the past, present, and future into a seamless continuity. Ammonius imagined the concentration, the devotion, the calm precision with which these men and women moved through their duties, their lives a delicate balance of discipline, knowledge, and reverence. Within private chambers, the pharaoh often engaged in study and contemplation. Scrolls of papyrus lay unrolled before him, inked with symbols that carried sacred meaning. He examined them quietly, perhaps reflecting on the history of his ancestors, the legacy of the gods, and the fragile threads that bound his decisions to the lives of millions. Even rulers, Ammonius realized, relied on ritual and reflection to ground themselves, to temper authority with understanding, and preserve the invisible equilibrium that sustained both palace and village. Outside, the palace garden slept under the silver glow of the moon. Pools mirrored the sky, lotus blossoms closed the night, and the gentle trickle of fountains whispered like a soft song. Here, the pharaoh might pause to inhale the scent of the earth and water, to feel the pulse of the world beyond gold and stone. The night offered privacy, a chance to rest in thought, to listen to the quiet heartbeat of a civilization, to sense the connection between human life and divine design. Even as the world slumbered, lessons were being absorbed in silence. Apprentices and scribes learned from the faintest movements of their teachers, from gestures too subtle to notice at first, from the cadence of soft chanting, from the way sacred tasks were performed without haste or error. Knowledge flowed not only through spoken words, but through observation, intention, and careful repetition. In this secret rhythm, Ammonius saw a truth he had glimpsed before in the lives of workers and artisans. Civilization is preserved not only by labor or power, but by devotion, precision, and quiet attentiveness to the world around us. And so, as the moon rose higher and shadows deepened, the secret lives of pharaohs and priests continued in their soft, unseen rhythm, shaping history not with noise or spectacle, but with the careful, deliberate pulse of human and divine hands, moving in harmony beneath the eternal sky. As the first light of dawn brushed the horizon, the palace and temple walls glowed softly, catching the delicate warmth of morning. The Nile shimmered faintly, its currents carrying whispers of the night past, reflections of stars fading into gold. Inside the temples, priests prepared for the new day's rituals, their movements precise and measured, as if the very act of rising was part of a sacred ceremony. The pharaoh, too, stirred from chambers lined with tapestries and gold, the weight of the crown balanced by centuries of tradition. Ammonius pictured the ruler, walking through quiet corridors, each step deliberate, each breath aligned with ritual. Outside the palace, gardens waited, lotus pools undisturbed, fountains still murmuring in gentle anticipation of the sun. In these moments, the pharaoh's world seemed suspended, a delicate pause between the night of reflection and the day of command. Every decision, every gesture, every glance would ripple outward, touching lives in distant villages, in fields, in workshops. Yet the ruler moved with quiet grace, aware of the invisible threads linking all things. Priests began their morning chants, voices low but steady, rising and falling like soft waves. They tended sacred fires, arranged offerings, and guided apprentices in the subtle gestures that had been repeated for generations. Knowledge here was sacred and slow, taught not in haste but in the rhythm of careful, deliberate instruction. Each gesture mattered. Each word carried weight. Ammonius imagined the apprentices' hands trembling slightly as they copied symbols on papyrus, the air thick with reverence. It was a world where attention transformed the ordinary into the divine, and where even mistakes were lessons etched into memory. Outside the palace gates, life in the city began to stir, but the pharaoh and priests remained in their carefully measured time. Servants carried water, prepared ceremonial cloths, and tended the gardens, their quiet diligence forming a soft symphony beneath the grand architecture. Here, even the mundane acted as a conduit to the sacred. Each sweep of a hand, each careful step, each small task connecting the human to the divine. Ammonius could almost feel the subtle hum of energy, invisible yet present, guiding both the ruler and the temple, shaping the flow of history with soft, deliberate force. By mid-morning, the sun climbed higher, spilling golden light across reliefs and statues, illuminating the care with which each had been carved. Pharaohs and priests alike navigated this world with a combination of awareness, ritual, and reflection. Each act, though hidden from ordinary eyes, carried consequences that rippled through the land, influencing both the laborers in distant villages and the very course of the Nile. In this hidden, sacred rhythm, Ammonius glimpsed the pulse of civilization itself, a delicate balance between power, devotion, knowledge, and the quiet artistry of daily life. And so, as the morning unfolded softly, the secret lives of pharaohs and priests continued their silent choreography, moving in quiet harmony with the river, the sun, and the people below, a hidden current shaping the heart of Egypt in ways both profound and eternal. As the day ripened into late afternoon, the palace and temple grounds carried a subtle, almost imperceptible energy. Courtyards shimmered with soft sunlight, fountains murmured in gentle cadence, and the walls seemed to hum with centuries of ritual and care. The pharaoh moved slowly through the spaces, mindful of the weight of history pressing lightly upon his shoulders. Each gesture, each glance, each word spoken or unspoken, was measured with the understanding that the balance of Egypt itself rested in subtle, unseen ways. The priests tended fires, prepared sacred offerings, and guided apprentices in the final lessons of the day. Ink traced carefully along papyrus, hieroglyphs forming stories of gods, kings, and the cycles of life and death. Every mark carried intention. Every motion echoed tradition, and every whispered prayer flowed into a rhythm that had persisted through countless generations. Outside the temple walls, the ordinary world moved on, unaware of the invisible threads connecting the divine and the mortal, the ruler and the citizen, the sacred and the mundane. In quiet chambers, the pharaoh sometimes paused by a small window overlooking the Nile. The river gleamed under the soft afternoon light, boats drifting lazily across its surface. For a moment, the world outside seemed gentle, unhurried, and infinite. Even the mightiest ruler, Ammonius reflected, was part of a larger current, a stream of life, labor, devotion, and cosmic order that flowed beyond any single life or reign. In these moments, reflection replaced command, patience replaced urgency, and profound calm settled over the palace. As evening approached, shadows stretched long across the temple floors and palace halls, softening every edge. Fires glowed in inner chambers, lamps flickered in hallways, and the scent of incense mingled with the warm Nile air. The pharaoh retired for the night, his day complete not in noise or spectacle, but in careful, deliberate acts that would ripple invisibly to the lives of all Egyptians. The priests whispered the final chants, tending sacred fires until only embers remained, preserving the balance until the next dawn. And so, under the quiet glow of moonlight, the secret lives of pharaohs and priests continued in their timeless rhythm. Though hidden from ordinary view, their devotion, their rituals, and their wisdom shaped Egypt's story with gentle insistence, weaving the pulse of power, faith, and humanity into the enduring heartbeat of a civilization that would echo forever. In the stillness, Ammonius could feel the pulse of history itself, quiet, continuous, and infinite. The sun rose gently over the Nile, spilling soft light across endless stretches of sand and stone. From a distance, the pyramids and temples appeared monumental, silent, and eternal, their grandeur almost otherworldly. Yet for those who lived near them, these structures were not merely marvels of stone. They were the embodiment of human ambition, devotion, and the quiet mastery of generations. Each block, each carving, each hieroglyph told a story, not only of kings and gods, but of countless hands and minds shaping a civilization with patience, precision, and reverence. Ammonius imagined the workers approaching construction sites at dawn, their bodies moving in rhythm with the rising sun. The air was filled with the soft, steady sound of chisels on stone, ropes stretching taut, and the careful scraping of wooden sleds across sand. Every movement carried both purpose and artistry, a harmony between human strength and the unforgiving material of the desert. In their quiet labor, there was a meditation, a rhythm that transformed effort into something eternal. Every stone placed, every surface polished, was a testament not only to skill, but to care, patience, and the subtle knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Inside the temples, sculptors traced divine figures onto walls, imagining gods and rulers in serene repose. Their hands moved slowly, deliberately, ensuring that proportions, angles, and expressions were perfect. Ammonius sensed a quiet satisfaction in their labor, a soft hum of accomplishment, like music that no one else heard. Hieroglyphs were etched with the same meticulous devotion, each symbol carrying layers of meaning, each line a bridge between the mortal and the divine. In these quiet acts, human hands achieved immortality. The architectural wonders were more than stone. They were instruments of light, shadow, and story. As the sun arced across the sky, columns threw long, poetic shadows, doorways framed pools of light, and statues glowed softly in the heat. Every element was intentional, designed to guide the observer's eyes and spirit. Ammonius imagined the first visitors, the pharaohs, priests, and pilgrims, walking through these spaces, sensing the weight and rhythm of history beneath their feet. Even in silence, the structure spoke, telling stories of devotion, power, and the delicate balance between human ambition and divine inspiration. As the day deepened, Ammonius pictured the quieter moments, artisans polishing stone, painters adding subtle hues to murals, architects measuring and remeasuring plans with careful hands. The work was repetitive, yet never dull, for each step carried weight. The grandeur of Egypt was not simply built in grand gestures, but in countless small decisions, each made with intention, care, and reverence. And as the sun began to soften, casting amber and rose across the sands. The structures themselves seemed to breathe, silent witnesses to the labor, love, and imagination of those who had given themselves so fully to their craft. And so, as the Nile shimmered in the late afternoon light, and shadows stretched long across the desert, the wonders of Egyptian art and architecture revealed themselves not just in stone, but in the quiet rhythm of human hands and minds, shaping history with patience, devotion, and an eternal sense of wonder. As the sun climbed higher, the desert air shimmered faintly, carrying the scent of sand, stone, and distant river reeds. Ammonius imagined the architects walking along the sites, measuring angles with careful hands, eyes tracing lines invisible to anyone else. Every plan, every corner, every foundation stone was laid with precision, a quiet negotiation between vision and reality. The grand monuments that would one day inspire all were first born in careful thought, sketches, and repeated contemplation, a testament to patience as much as talent. Sculptors labored in shaded courtyards, chisels tapping stone with steady rhythm. Dust rose gently into the air, soft as mist, carrying the faint scent of sun-warmed granite. Their hands moved with a meditation born of practice and devotion, coaxing figures from rock that had existed long before they arrived. Pharaohs, gods, animals, and symbols slowly emerged from the unyielding stone, each curve a testament to skill and quiet reverence. Ammonius could almost hear the faint echo of chisels across centuries, each strike a soft heartbeat in the body of history. Painters added color to walls, murals of daily life, ritual, and myth, blending earth tones with vibrant pigments derived from minerals and plants. Each brushstroke was deliberate, soft, and purposeful. Even the tiniest detail, the fold of a garment, the curve of a lotus, the expression of a face, carried meaning. These images would endure far longer than the painters themselves, communicating the essence of culture, faith, and imagination to generations who would never meet the hands that made them. Every monument and temple was aligned with the sun, stars, or river in ways that whispered of knowledge both practical and mystical. Columns were positioned to catch the morning light, illuminating sacred symbols in golden glow. Entrances framed views of the Nile, reflecting water and sky to evoke both awe and serenity. Even the most ordinary wall became extraordinary when considered in relation to light, shadow, and the rhythm of time. The Egyptians understood that architecture was not only physical, it was poetic, spiritual, and eternal. As evening approached, shadows lengthened across the stone, transforming shapes and carvings into living forms. Workers cleaned surfaces, touched up paint, and performed final checks, their gestures precise and unhurried. The day's labor had been long, yet satisfying, a quiet harmony between human effort and the grandeur created. Ammonius imagined the first observers returning to these sites, walking through corridors and courtyards, feeling the energy of centuries, sensing the invisible hands that had shaped the stone, and knowing, even if unconsciously, that they were stepping to the heartbeat of history itself. And so, as the sun dipped lower, casting the world in amber and rose, the wonders and mysteries of Egyptian art and architecture stood not only as monuments of stone, but as living testimony to patience, devotion, and the quiet mastery of human hands, a rhythm that would echo, soft and eternal, for all time. Night descended softly over construction sites and temples, draping the valley in a gentle, velvety darkness. Even as lamps flickered and fires glowed in scattered courtyards, the monuments themselves seemed to pulse quietly, absorbing the labor, imagination, and devotion that had been poured into them. Ammonius imagined the workers and artisans pausing for a moment, gazing upon their creations with silent pride. Though the day's effort had ended, the stone, wood, and pigment carried the echo of their hands, whispering the rhythm of human dedication into eternity. The pyramids rose like frozen waves against the starlit sky, their shadows stretching over the desert sands. Every block of stone had been positioned with intention, each surface carefully polished, each angle measured to perfection. Ammonius felt the weight of centuries in their presence, the quiet testimony of countless hands that had lifted, shaped, and placed each piece in harmony with the others. These were not merely buildings. They were expressions of vision, patience, and reverence to the divine order that governed the world. Within the temples, the soft glow of lamps illuminated intricate reliefs. Priests and scribes, working late into night, traced hieroglyphs with steady hands. Each symbol carried meaning layered across generations, a bridge between mortal lives and eternal truths. The air smelled faintly of ink, stone, and warm oil, a sensory reminder that creation was never only external. It existed in the careful rhythm of thought and gesture, in devotion made tangible. Ammonius imagined the quiet concentration of these artisans, their minds and hands perfectly synchronized, every movement deliberate, every stroke imbued with purpose. In the open courtyards, shadows of statues stretched across smooth stone floors, transformed by the silver moonlight. Even the faintest contour seemed alive under this gentle illumination, the gods, rulers, and animals carved in stone whispering their stories to the night. Ammonius could sense the intentionality behind every curve, every line, how geometry and artistry intertwined to create both function and awe. The Egyptians had understood, even then, that architecture and art were not separate from life, but were extensions of it, echoing the rhythm of the river, the sun, and the sky. As the night deepened, the monuments rested in their eternal stillness, yet they vibrated softly with the memory of creation. Ammonius felt a deep calm settle over him as he imagined the laborers leaving the sites, the priests extinguishing lamps, and the last traces of human presence lingering in the quiet. Even in darkness, the work lived on, in stone, in paint, in shadow, in memory. The wonders of Egypt were not just monuments to the eye, but symphonies of human intention, patience, and reverence, standing quietly through centuries as witnesses to the harmony between craft, imagination, and eternity. And so, as stars shimmered overhead and the Nile reflected the moon's gentle glow, the art and architecture of ancient Egypt whispered softly to those willing to listen, secrets of devotion, labor, and timeless beauty, echoing in rhythm with the heartbeat of history itself. Dawn returned slowly to the Nile Valley, painting the desert sands in soft pinks and golds. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of mud, lotus flowers, and warm stone. Ammonius imagined the artisans rising once more, their hands ready to resume work, their minds attuned to centuries of technique and devotion. The monuments, resting in the quiet of the night, now welcomed the new day with calm dignity, reflecting the sun's early glow like a mirror of human intention made eternal. Stonecutters returned to the pyramids and temples, chisels glinting softly in the morning light. Each tap of the hammer was precise, deliberate, a quiet meditation on perfection. The dust rose like morning mist, swirling in soft tendrils, catching the light as if to celebrate the rhythm of human effort. Ammonius felt the weight of time in every movement, the patience embedded in generations of labor, and the silent dialogue between the worker and the stone. Every block place was more than functional. It was a piece of poetry, a testament to a civilization that understood the power of persistence. Painters and sculptors returned to murals and statues, their brushes and tools guided by both experience and reverence. Ammonius pictured pigments being mixed from earth, minerals, and plants, producing colors that seem alive in the soft sunlight. Figures of gods, pharaohs, and daily life emerged with fluidity, each line intentional, each expression infused with meaning. It was not mere decoration, but storytelling, a rhythm of life captured in form, a language both visual and emotional, meant to last far beyond the lives of those who created it. Even the architectural design spoke of poetry. Columns, doorways, and open courtyards were aligned to the movement of the sun, the reflection of water, and the whisper of wind through the desert. Shadows stretched and shifted across carvings, changing their meaning and mood throughout the day. Ammonius understood that the Egyptians had designed not just buildings, but experiences, moments of awe, reflection, and calm that connected human perception to cosmic order. Every stone, every curve, every reflection was part of a living dialogue between people and the world, a rhythm that transcended generations. As the day moved toward afternoon, Ammonius pictured visitors entering the temples, priests, pilgrims, and the curious, all guided by the deliberate placement of light and shadow, color, and form. Even ordinary actions became extraordinary within these spaces, touched by centuries of care, intention, and devotion. Here, human life intersected with eternity. Art became ritual, and architecture became both story and guardian of memory. And as the sun began to soften once more, casting amber light across the monuments, the rhythm of creation continued, soft, deliberate, and unending, whispering to every heart willing to listen. And so, as the Nile shimmered in golden light and the desert stretched infinitely beyond, The wonders of Egyptian art and architecture stood not only as monuments of stone and color, but as living testimony to human patience, imagination, and reverence, eternal echoes of civilization that thrive in harmony with both earth and sky. As the evening sun began its slow descent, the monuments of Egypt were bathed in warm, amber light. Shadows stretched long across courtyards, walls, and statues, softening the edges of carved stone and painted surfaces. Ammonius imagined the artisans, exhausted but fulfilled, finishing their day's work with gentle care. Each chisel mark, each brushstroke, each carefully laid block was a silent song of devotion, an echo of countless generations who had contributed their hands and hearts to the living story of this land. The pyramids stood like silent guardians, their presence both monumental and intimate. Each stone, heavy and immovable, seemed to pulse with the memory of those who had lifted it, placed it, and perfected it. Ammonius felt the hum of effort embedded in their very foundations, the invisible fingerprints of those who had worked not for fame, but for eternity itself. Even in the stillness of night, the pyramids carried the rhythm of human life, the cadence of labor, patience, and unwavering devotion. Temples glowed softly as oil lamps flickered along corridors, illuminating hieroglyphs that told stories of gods, kings, and the cycles of life. Priests moved quietly among the chambers, tending sacred fires and whispering prayers that had persisted for centuries. Apprentices watched and learned in silence, tracing the movements of those who had mastered both skill and ritual. Every gesture, every motion, every breath became a lesson in reverence, patience, and enduring power of intention. Ammonius imagined walking to the temple gardens as the moon rose, lotus pools reflecting the pale light, fountains murmuring a soft lullaby. The air was warm with the scent of stone, water, and flowers. Even the quietest steps resonated in the vast spaces, a gentle reminder that every act, no matter how small, contributed to a larger harmony. Architecture and art here were not just functional or beautiful. They were expressions of balance, continuity, and a human understanding of the sacred rhythms that govern the world. As night deepened, the monuments seemed to exhale, resting in their eternal stillness. Yet beneath the calm, the pulse of Egypt continued. In the stones, the pigments, the hands that had built, carved, and painted. Ammonius felt the quiet awe of it all, the labor, the devotion, and the imagination that had transformed earth and sand into a civilization's heartbeat. In this rhythm, soft and enduring, the wonders of Egyptian art and architecture whisper their secrets to anyone willing to listen. Timeless echoes of patience, skill, and human reverence, standing eternal beneath the stars. The sun rose gently over the Nile, spilling soft light across villages, fields, and winding streets. Ammonius imagined the world awakening in quiet rhythm, the scent of fresh earth and flowing water mingling with the subtle fragrance of baked bread and warm clay. Here, life was both ordinary and sacred, a delicate balance between toil and devotion, between survival and the invisible threads that connected humans to gods, ancestors, and the pulse of the river itself. Fishermen slid silently into the waters, their nets trailing behind like whispers, catching sustenance for the day ahead. Women tended the homes, kneading dough, weaving cloth, or gathering water from the Nile, their movements graceful and familiar, as natural as the river's current. Children ran along the banks, laughter spilling like sunlight over the water, learning from play the subtle rhythms of life, labor, and learning. Each task, however small, was imbued with intention, a harmony between necessity and ritual, the ordinary and the eternal. Priests moved through villages and temples with measured steps, carrying offerings and prayers, guiding festivals and ceremonies. Ammonius imagined their voices soft but clear, chanting blessings that floated over fields and homes, connecting mortal hearts to the divine. Every gesture, every word, every incense-laden breath was deliberate, carrying the weight of tradition and the quiet pulse of devotion. In this seamless blend of sacred and ordinary, the people of Egypt lived within a world that was both earthly and eternal. Daily life was punctuated by moments of reflection. A mother pausing at the river to watch sunlight glinting on the water, a scribe tracing symbols in carefully prepared ink, a farmer pausing to listen to the gentle rustle of reeds in the breeze. Even in the humblest actions, there was reverence, a recognition that life itself was a gift, flowing from the gods, shaped by labor, and preserved in the cycles of river, sun, and season. Harmonious sense of continuity in each gesture, a silent thread connecting past and present, human and divine, living and eternal. As the day deepened, festivals and offerings brought vibrancy to villages and temples alike. Music floated over streets and courtyards, drums beating gently like the pulse of the land, flutes and harps adding melody that seemed as old as the river. Families gathered, priests instructed, children watched and learned, and the harmony of daily life intertwined seamlessly with devotion. Even in movement, Egypt seemed to breathe, a living rhythm that bound human action to the unseen, the sacred, and the enduring patterns of existence. And so, as the sun climbed higher, casting gold across the Nile and desert, Ammonius felt the subtle heartbeat of life in every gesture, every prayer, every step along the winding paths of the villages and temples. The spiritual and daily lives of ancient Egyptians were inseparable, flowing quietly, harmoniously, and eternally, like the river itself. As the afternoon sun warmed the Nile Valley, Ammonius imagined the rhythm of life unfolding gently across villages. Farmers moved through the fields with measured steps, guiding oxen that pulled plows through the fertile soil. The earth was soft beneath their feet, rich with the remnants of the river's flood, and each furrow carved into the land carried both sustenance and silent devotion. Planting and harvest were more than tasks. They were prayers in motion, acts that honored the delicate balance of life, gods, and nature. In homes, women worked with quiet diligence. Clay pots were shaped by careful hands, woven mats smoothed and arranged, meals prepared with attentiveness that seemed to transform ordinary ingredients into sustenance worthy of reverence. Children watched, learning not only skills but the subtle art of mindfulness, how each gesture, each careful touch, could ripple outward, influencing family, community, and even the unseen world of spirits and ancestors. Ammonius felt the serenity in these moments, the gentle rhythm of ordinary lives flowing seamlessly into the sacred. Temples echoed softly with chants as priests guided offerings and rituals. Their movements were deliberate, a choreography perfected over centuries. Incense smoke spiraled, toward high ceilings, catching sunlight in thin beams that made the air shimmer like liquid gold. Ammonius imagined the delicate care in every gesture, from lifting vessels of oil to the precise placement of flowers. Even the smallest act was layered with intention, connecting the physical world to the divine, the living to eternity. Here, time itself seemed to stretch and soften, allowing humans to glimpse the eternal through daily ritual. Markets and streets hummed quietly with life. Merchants called softly. Children played along the edges of stone pathways, and animals moved with natural ease. Yet even in this lively environment, there was an unspoken order, a respect for balance and harmony. Each individual knew their role, their contribution to the greater rhythm of life, whether carrying water, weaving linen, or tending the flocks. Ammonius felt the pulse of community, a heartbeat that mirrored the flow of the Nile, steady and eternal, sustaining both body and spirit. As the sun dipped low, casting amber light across mud-brick walls and riverbanks, Ammonius pictured families gathering to share meals and stories. Laughter mingled with prayer, music blended with reflection, and the cycle of life, sacred and ordinary, continued. Even as night approached, the rituals of preparation and devotion ensured that the connection between mortals and gods remained unbroken. Ammonius sensed a continuity in each act. The spiritual and daily lives of Egyptians were intertwined, each supporting and honoring the other, flowing together in gentle, enduring rhythm. And so, as shadows lengthened across villages and temples, and the river shimmered under soft twilight, life moved quietly yet purposefully, a delicate harmony of faith, labor, and human presence, echoing through centuries and carrying the heartbeat of ancient Egypt ever onward. Night began to fold gently over the Nile Valley, softening the edges of homes, temples, and fields. The last rays of sun kissed the river, turning its surface into molten gold, and shadows stretched long across stone and sand. Ammonius imagined the villagers winding down from their day's work, their movements slower now, measured and deliberate. Even the smallest gestures, gathering water, securing animals, arranging simple meals, felt significant, infused with the quiet dignity of lives intertwined with the eternal flow of the river and the divine rhythms of the land. Inside the temples, priests prepared for evening rituals. The flickering light of oil lamps danced across walls etched with stories of gods, kings, and the cycles of life and death. Incense spiraled upward, delicate clouds carrying scent and prayer through chambers where knowledge and devotion were carefully preserved. Ammonius pictured the young apprentices observing in quiet concentration, tracing their teacher's hands, learning the cadence of ceremony, the soft rhythm of offerings, and the way that even silence could be meaningful. Knowledge, he realized, was passed not only through words but through intention, touch, and careful observation. Meanwhile, families gathered under the soft glow of lanterns, sharing modest meals and quiet conversation. A father told tales of the gods and ancestors. A mother shared practical wisdom woven with gentle lessons. And children listened, eyes wide, absorbing both the stories and the rhythm of human life itself. In these simple acts, Ammonius felt the interweaving of the spiritual and the daily. Prayer and labor, celebration and reflection, laughter and ritual all flowed together like the waters of Nile, inseparable, sustaining, eternal. As darkness deepened, the night creatures emerged, their sounds mingling with the quiet murmur of the river and the soft, fading songs of evening prayers. Even in the stillness, the pulse of life continued, the rhythm of mortals and gods, of labor and devotion, of ordinary days made sacred through attention and care. Ammonius imagined the soft glow of firelight in homes, the flicker of oil lamps in temples, and the reflection of stars in the river, all reminding humans of their small yet profound place within the cosmos. And so, as the night wrapped the valley in its gentle embrace, Ammonius could sense the heartbeat of ancient Egypt continuing quietly and unfailingly. Each day had its work, each night its reflection, and every life, from pharaoh to farmer, priest to child, was threaded into a tapestry both delicate and enduring. The spiritual and daily lives of Egyptians were inseparable, moving in a rhythm both soft and infinite, guiding the pulse of history as surely as the Nile guided the land itself. The moon rose slowly over the Nile, casting silver light across the water and the quiet villages along its banks. Ammonius imagined the reflections dancing softly on mud-brick walls, on lotus-filled pools, and on the golden sands that stretched beyond the horizon. Even in the deepest quiet, life continued, a rhythm of human presence intertwined with the eternal flow of river, sky, and time. Here, the spiritual and the mundane were inseparable, each day shaped by devotion, labor, and the gentle awareness of forces larger than oneself. In homes, lanterns glowed softly, illuminating women weaving, cooking, and quietly teaching their children the customs of life. Every action carried intention. Even simple tasks, like kneading dough or tending a fire, were imbued with care and purpose, a recognition that daily life itself was a sacred rhythm. Children learned to move with attention and respect, absorbing lessons not only of skill but harmony, a subtle understanding that life, work, and devotion were threads woven together in quiet, enduring patterns. At the temples, priests continued their watch over sacred spaces. Soft chants echoed through corridors, and the faint scent of incense wove through air thick with history. Every gesture was precise, every offering deliberate, maintaining the unseen balance between human and divine. Apprentices traced patterns of motion and sound, learning the unspoken language of ritual, a quiet poetry where silence and breath carried as much meaning as spoken words. Ammonius felt the slow unfolding of time in these moments, the continuity of centuries preserved in careful hands and devoted hearts. Outside, the river flowed endlessly, carrying whispers of life downstream. Farmers and fishermen rested from their labors, reflecting on the day's work, feeling the steady pulse of nature in their veins. Even their repose was part of the rhythm, a soft acknowledgement that human lives were guided by cycles larger than themselves. Ammonius imagined the gentle interplay of moonlight on water, the distant calls of night birds, and the rustling of reeds along the banks, all harmonized with human activity, prayer, and rest in a quiet, eternal cadence. As the night deepened, lanterns dimmed and homes fell into stillness. Even in rest, the rhythm persisted. The spiritual and daily lives of ancient Egyptians moved together, like a gentle song, flowing through time and echoing quietly in the stones, the river, and the hearts of those who lived, worked, and worshipped along its banks. Ammonius felt a profound continuity of life, ordinary moments touched by devotion, small gestures reaching into eternity, and the steady heartbeat of a civilization unfolding softly, endlessly, and beautifully. As the night deepened, the Nile shimmered under the silver glow of the moon, carrying the reflections of stars across its gentle currents. Ammonius imagined the villages and temples resting in quiet rhythm, their inhabitants asleep or paused in soft contemplation. The labor of the day had ended, yet the invisible threads of life, devotion, and rhythm continued, weaving together the ordinary and the sacred into a seamless, eternal fabric. Each home, each temple, each person was part of a vast, delicate pattern, connecting generations past and future in a quiet, enduring flow. In the temple halls, faint lamplight flickered across hieroglyphs, and the lingering scent of incense lingered in the air like a gentle whisper. Priests who remained vigilant moved softly, ensuring that sacred fires continued their eternal burn, while apprentices traced symbols with careful hands, learning the cadence of ritual and reverence. Each gesture, no matter how small, was a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a reminder that life was measured not only in years or deeds, but in attention, devotion, and the subtle harmony between human and cosmic order. In homes, families rested together, their breathing steady and calm. Parents reflected on the day's work. Children dreamed beneath woven mats. And even the simplest gestures, a mother smoothing a child's hair, a father adjusting a lantern, became acts of care and continuity. Ammonius felt the poetry in these moments, the quiet testament to the ways ordinary lives were shaped by faith, routine, and the deep, unspoken understanding of humanity's place in the universe. Outside, the river moved slowly, carrying the memories of toil, worship, laughter, and song. Its pulse mirrored the heartbeat of Egypt itself, steady, unbroken, and eternal. The monuments, temples, and homes, all bathed in soft moonlight, seemed to hold within them the whisper of countless lives, each act, each prayer, each gesture resonating across time. Even in darkness, the rhythm of human and divine life persisted, subtle, soft, and unending. And so, as the night wrapped the Nile Valley in its gentle embrace, Ammonius sensed the full tapestry of Egyptian life. The spiritual interwoven with the daily, labor touched by devotion, ordinary actions suffused with meaning. In the quiet of moonlight, the heartbeat of ancient Egypt continued, soft, eternal, and harmonious, a rhythm that carried the souls of those who lived, worked, and worshipped along its banks into the infinite flow of history itself.